Hey there, you guys. So sorry again, it's been a while since I've done another video. Unfortunately, I've been really busy and I haven't really had a chance to sit and make a video for this kind of stuff. But I have a bit of a surprise because I'm going to be doing a triple review in this video. I'm going to start off with The Great Gatsby because that was a movie that I saw before the other two, and that's the one where I think my memory is the most hazy in terms of the film, so I'm going to start off with that one, and then I'm going to go into World War Z, and then I'll talk about Star Trek for a little bit. So let's get into Great Gatsby first of all. Great Gatsby, I was looking forward to the movie actually, considering Baz Luhrmann is a director whose work I've never loved, but I've never hated either. I enjoy Moulin Rouge to a certain extent. You know, I understand it's really cheesy and corny, but its visuals are really nice, and there's this sort of aspect to it where it's like I know it's not fantastic filmmaking, but it's still entertaining to a certain extent. And it's one of those few films where it's like I can turn my brain off for a little bit. And I usually don't like films like that. I don't like movies where it's like you have to turn your brain off in order to accept it, in order to not criticize it. And I'm like, no, there's things I can acknowledge that are bad about it and that aren't great. And I could say that for a lot of Baz Luhrmann's movies. I have a similar opinion about Australia. Australia, again, is a movie that isn't fantastic by any means, but I still enjoy watching it, and I still think it's sort of cheesy and hilarious, but it's also like bad at the same time, and but it's still enjoyable to watch. And with The Great Gatsby, I feel like to represent the 1920s in this sort of over glamorized and over stylized era that the United States was in during that time, it kind of makes sense for Baz Luhrmann to do an adaptation of The Great Gatsby, and he really doesn't disappoint in terms of that. It is a beautiful looking movie. It is a film that when you watch it you feel that splendor and that glamour sort of as its own character in the film. He does a really good job of making it feel like just the time period that we're in for the film is in and of itself its own character and has its own presence in the film. And he's really good at doing that in his movies. But in terms of everything else, because no one is ever going to walk away from a Baz Luhrmann movie and say like, okay, it didn't look good. In general, I actually kind of like the movie. Again, not going to be one of my favorite films ever, and it's not, a film I would recommend to everybody. But considering the source material as a book that almost everyone was forced to read in high school, and I live in Canada, we were even forced to read it, and basically a lot of the time while we were in school in Canada, we're actually taught a lot about the United States and taught a lot about the American dream, and of course the book that we read and studied for the concept of this was The Great Gatsby. So my memory of the book itself is a little hazy, but I do remember the basics, and I remember watching I think it's the 1970s version. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's with Robert Redford in it, and I remember liking that movie. But in terms of the adaptational quality of it, the movie feels long for a book that I remember being almost fairly short. It's not a very long book from what I remember. So this movie goes on for 2.5 hours, and it's really weird too because the pacing of the movie is really, really quick at the beginning. Like it's breakneck speeds at the very beginning of the movie. You are literally cutting from scene to scene to scene to scene, and even in conversations of dialogue, they're cutting so quickly back and forth between different characters that there's no breathe room. There's no breathing room between these characters and their reactions to each other's dialogue, and it's really kind of stilted and unrealistic. But I also remember that happening at the beginning of Moulin Rouge as well. He has that kind of sort of getting right into the story and especially, it actually, if anything, the beginning of the movie almost feels like an exact duplicate of Moulin Rouge in a lot of ways, because you have a narrational character who's sort of retelling the story of what happened, and we're looking at this through Tobey Maguire's character, who is essentially just the narrator of the story. I kind of like the idea of him retelling it as a writer and going back and like writing it all down, but also doing it in this sort of psychiatric area. It sort of gives him more of a reason to do it versus just I'm just going to write this down. And I think it gives a bit more meaning behind it. But in any case, yeah. So they both have very similar beginnings, and once it gets into the actual like starts with the flashbacks and starts with the story, the dialogue and the scenes are so quickly cut together that you're almost missing out on who's who. And the first time that we really sort of take a break and we really realize who any of the people are is basically when we are introduced to Daisy, who is his cousin. And there's this scene of her when she's just like in this room and all these billowing curtains everywhere, and she's just absolutely stunning. And it's like, oh, okay, that it's sort of one of the few breaks that we get in the opening, in the first few like 10 to 20 minutes of the movie. It's like the first break we get. But in terms of Tobey Maguire's narration, considering I've never been a huge fan of his acting, I really wasn't much of a fan of his portrayal of Peter Parker in Spider-Man. I haven't really liked him in many other movies. He was a bit of the wild card in terms of whether or not I wanted to go see this movie, because I did want to see The Great Gatsby just because it looked visually stunning. And I was like, you know what, beyond the story and stuff like that, I just kind of wanted to see it for the visuals. And of course it didn't disappoint, but beyond that, I'm like, Tobey Maguire is going to be like the one actor I might be disappointed in the movie. And surprisingly, he's actually pretty good. He plays a very good straight man in this story, and sort of the neutral person doesn't really get in the way of much of the conflict. He's more of an aide to Gatsby at certain points, but he doesn't really get heavily involved at any point, and he's just very good at telling the outsider perspective. He's very good at being the audience's in into the movie, which I think is really good for narrator. You don't want your character necessarily to be too directly involved, I think, with what's going on, because especially when they're the audience surrogate. So for a lot of the film, you're kind of feeling like that where you really only know what's going on because his character is there. There's not much that happens in the movie where Tobey Maguire is not there. So he's very much the audience surrogate, and he does a very good job of it, surprisingly. I thought his voice was going to get grating as a narration, and surprisingly it wasn't. And Leonardo DiCaprio, of course, was just amazing in the movie as Gatsby. DiCaprio's really been on his A game for the last batch of films that he's made. He was fantastic in Django. It really kind of surprises me that I think he's only been nominated once for an Oscar, and that was like for What's Eating Gilbert Grape. So that was like early in his career. I'm surprised that since then I don't think he's gotten an Oscar nomination, let alone won an Oscar. And I think it's actually only recently that people have started to like look at him as a very talented and serious actor, versus I think maybe 5 years ago and back, everyone sort of considered him to be more of what his reputation was in the late 90s, early 2000s, which was, he was sort of like a teen idol, especially after Titanic and stuff like that, and Romeo and Juliet, another Baz Luhrmann movie, it kind of made sense. But now he's proven himself as a really talented actor in a lot of movies, and I'm just surprised that it still hasn't really registered with the Academy. Carey Mulligan does a great Daisy. She does a very good job at playing this sort of character that comes off as very outgoing and very carefree, but at the same time she's also very timid and shy. It's sort of this weird duality of Daisy that she plays off very well. And there was another character in the movie, and I totally forget what the character's name is, and I don't even know the actress's name either, but she's the friend of Daisy and kind of comes along with them when they go out and they go to New York and stuff like that. She's got the short black hair. She was really good in this movie. Her acting was fantastic, and I really liked that character. I wish they did more with her character. From what I remember in the book, I know she wasn't super involved either, but still, I kind of wish that they could have expanded on that a little bit. Because that's the thing, just because you're taking an adaptation from a book doesn't necessarily mean that you have to follow the book point for point. If there is a way that you think you can add something to it, or make a character more interesting, or just develop something about the character that maybe wasn't so explained in the book, I would say go for it. You don't necessarily have to follow a book point for point just to satisfy the fans, I would guess, of Great Gatsby. I don't know if The Great Gatsby really had fans because everyone was kind of forced to read it. But I do feel like that was a character that was worth exploring a little bit more, as well as the character that Ilsa Fisher played. She's the mistress of Daisy's husband, and I totally forget the character's name. I think it was either Marge or Marla, something like that. And that was her character, and she's only in it like twice in the movie, three times. Maybe she's got like one extended scene when they all go to New York together and they're hanging out in an apartment, and Tobey Maguire's character kind of like gets really drunk and really tipsy. You know, she was fantastic as that character. I kind of wish that, again, that they had explored that character a little bit more, explained just a tiny bit more of her relationship with her husband, because by the end of it, her husband is so broken up over, spoiler alert, her death, that that he goes and kills Gatsby. And that's pretty much the ending of the movie, is Gatsby getting killed. And he has his funeral, no one really comes except for the press. It's sort of a very tragic ending, which it is. It's sort of the whole point of the story, if no one really knows the point of The Great Gatsby, it's to show that not only what the ideals of the American dream are, but the fact is that the American dream can become so corrupted on the way to what you want. The fact that Gatsby is a man who's attracted to Daisy, and they knew each other before she got married, and she thought that he had either been killed or he was off somewhere else, and she marries, and Gatsby basically spends the entire movie trying to win Daisy's affection back and trying to basically get her away from her husband, from Tom Buchanan. And as well as Tom Buchanan, the actor who plays him. I keep forgetting these actors' names. It's been a while since I saw this movie, so my memory is not that great, but I know a lot of other movies that he's been in. I know he was in Zero Dark 30 as well, and he's fantastic. He's great as Tom Buchanan. Very menacing when he wants to be, and very imposing. Just fantastic acting. Again, this movie has really good acting. I just want to say that now. But, yeah, so while he's trying to win Daisy's affections, he becomes very corrupted, because you sort of have the idea, because he's part of bootlegging, which of course was illegal in the 1920s because of prohibition and all that kind of fun stuff. So the idea that everyone has the opportunity to pursue the American dream, but at the same time you kind of get corrupted on the way there. And even by the end of it, Daisy doesn't even accept or go with Gatsby. Like, she has all these chances to leave Tom and for them to go off together, but then she just kind of like, no, I have security with Tom, and this is, he can give me what I want, and it's too difficult to leave him. And so it shows the selfishness and again, the corruption that this lifestyle has kind of led to in the 1920s. And I think in that sense, they did a very good job in the movie. They really portray that very well. I just wish that the movie itself, in terms of, probably my major problems with it, is the pacing. It's really, really quick in the beginning, and then the rest of the movie really slows down and drags out. Again, considering that the book itself isn't that long of a read and it's not that complicated of a read, you could probably do an hour and a half long movie, maybe an hour and 45 minutes. It didn't need to be 2.5 hours long, so it did drag in certain parts. Overall, I thought the movie was enjoyable. I thought it was a pretty damn good adaptation of a book that not many people enjoy or want to read when they're in high school, and I think they've actually made a pretty comparable adaptation to show as an alternative to reading the book, because again, I'm the type of person that prefers a visual format over reading something. Probably the only exception to that being comic books, but even comic books is still a visual format. That's sort of my angle on this, and I'm kind of like, you know what, they did a pretty damn good, truthful adaptation to the book. There's only some minor changes from the book, and those changes are not major. They do not drastically change the plot. So I think that it's very good in terms of what it needs to be, which is faithful to the source material and faithful to its own characters, something that I need from adaptations. And I'm going to go into that more once we go into World War Z, which will be next. Okay, so World War Z. I saw this a couple nights ago, I want to say on Thursday night. I saw it as a double feature at a drive-in with a couple of friends with Star Trek. World War Z was a movie that I was looking forward to, but at the exact same time I was not looking forward to, and there's two reasons for this. The first being the fact that I was looking forward to it because I had read the book, one of the few books I actually did read and really enjoyed, and I was excited when I first heard that they were making a movie out of it because the concept itself of this sort of anthology of people's stories over the course of the zombie apocalypse. That's basically what the book is. It's no straight storyline just following one character. It's sort of this one guy who's going across the world and gathering these different stories to give a broader picture of what happened during this war that they called World War Z. And that's sort of the point. It's to not really focus on one particular character. It's sort of meant to give this grand scale of how much this impacted the world, but at the same time, making it a small story and making it a human story. And that's what makes the book so interesting, because you don't see that very much in zombie movies. You're usually following one character at the very beginning of the outbreak, and then it just kind of goes where the movie ends, and that one character manages to survive, and then they're like, okay, we're going off into a brave new world of this is how we have to live now as survivors. And that's usually how most zombie movies play out. And unfortunately, the movie version of World War Z is just like every other zombie movie. It plays out. We literally have one scene of Brad Pitt with his family, and in their home, and they're hearing about what's going on over the news about the outbreak just starting out in some other countries, but as far as they know, it hadn't hit the United States yet. We have like one or two minor scenes of us like getting to know him and his family, but it's not very much development. And then like the very next scene, it's straight into the outbreak. So like they're in their car in I think they're in Philadelphia, and just all hell breaks loose. Again, really quickly paced at the very beginning. This movie really moves quickly. It's, I think, about like 20 minutes in, they've already encountered the first of the zombies themselves in Philadelphia, and they've met up with another family inside a building, and then they're in the helicopter, and then they're gone to this aircraft carrier. Sorry, I blanked for a second. Yeah, basically 25 minutes into the movie, they're already on the aircraft carrier, and that's breakneck speed to me. It's like usually in most zombie apocalypse movies, that would be about an hour of the film. Like right there is the first hour, is getting to know the characters, having the outbreak, and then them trying to survive and find other survivors and getting out of the situation. That takes place in about 20 to 25 minutes. So it's really quick. And in those 25 minutes, it's so hard to tell the difference between a normal person, a normal human being, and one of the zombies. It is so difficult to tell the difference. The only way you can tell it's a zombie is if there's like one steady cam close-up of it, which doesn't happen too often in the movie, and their eyes kind of look like they're blinded over, like they have the sort of the white film over the irises, and they also have like some of the blue veins on their skin, and that's pretty much it. And especially considering the speed that these things move at, they move at breakneck speeds, and they use so much shaky cam that it's impossible to tell the difference between a zombie and a person. You don't know what's going on, you can't tell the difference. And really, the only way that you know that that's what's going on is the one scene where Brad Pitt kind of looks over. There's a guy who gets kind of yanked out of his car when a zombie kind of breaks through the windshield, bites them, and then the zombie just leaves him alone and runs off to go bite other people. I thought the whole point of zombies was they eat. They are there to eat people, and they are not eating people in this movie. They are basically just biting. Like, they take one bite, and then they just keep going. It's more like they're doing it as a way to procreate, to expand the species. That seems like their prime directive in this. It's more like, we need to make as many zombies as possible, Screw the whole point of zombies needing to eat human flesh. It's just go, eat, take one bite, and keep going. And so Brad Pitt looks over and he basically counts down how long it takes for this one guy to turn into a zombie. And it's this sort of weird, childish countdown in his head. And then later on you realize, oh, that was him counting. And it's a really weird scene. There is one interesting aspect about this, and that is the government aspect of it, because a lot of the times in zombie films, they don't really focus on, well, what's the government doing? How are they handling this? What kind of system would they put into place other than martial law to try and control this? There is something interesting about that, and seeing that in this movie, that is the interesting part of it. But it's so... It kind of just comes and goes really quickly, so you don't really get to know much about it. It's kind of like you're just following Brad Pitt's character, and it's like, well, that's just one person following orders from some other government official. And you get the idea that the governments of the world are all like corresponding with each other, trying to figure out how fast people are turning and what percentage of the population is left and what safe places there are, who needs to be evacuated. You can get the sense of that. But in terms of like what the actual plan is, it seems like Brad Pitt was just kind of making shit up as he was going along and eventually just kind of figured out how to solve the problem, which, spoiler alert, I'm just basically going to keep jumping into spoilers because I'm doing 3 reviews, so I just kind of want to go straight into spoilers within the review itself. But yeah, spoiler alert. He injects himself when he gets to a WHO center, and he injects himself with a curable disease because his theory is that the zombies will avoid people who are sick or who currently are diseased or have some other illness. They will not attack anything else that is attack anything that is already diseased with something else. And you see this throughout the film. They actually do a pretty good job of that, kind of foreshadowing it, because you see this drunk guy sitting on the street and he's kind of like just boozing away, and all the zombies just run past him. It happens in Jerusalem. It happens a couple of other times. So and you quickly realize, like, oh, there must be something odd about those people. Like, why would the zombies just run around them like as if they didn't exist? And we realize it's because those people were probably ill with something. And so the whole climax of the movie is him trying to get to the area where all the diseases are held, which is apparently in this glass cube container that is apparently bulletproof or shatterproof or something, I don't know. And then is him injecting himself, hoping that the disease itself won't even kill him, and then testing it out by walking through hordes of zombies and not getting eaten. So basically, it's not really a cure. It's sort of like the way you would spray yourself with bug spray before going into the woods or something to prevent yourself from getting bitten by mosquitoes. It's kind of the same thing. It's not really a cure for it, so the people who are zombies are still zombies, but they figure out a way to prevent other people from becoming zombies, and it's basically just infecting everyone with a disease and then giving them the cure for that disease immediately after. And then at the end of the movie, they basically say, and then after that came the war. This was just the beginning. It's like, I'm sorry, this movie is called World War Z, and you don't get to the war part, and you don't even mention the war until the very end. That really bothers me for some reason. It's like, the whole point of the book was to sort of look back on how this had affected people on a small scale, but also at the same time making it with such a broad worldwide view. This is focusing on such an unimportant character who we really know nothing about. He is simply motivated by the fact that his family is only on an aircraft carrier because he is a government official and he works with the UN. And they're basically saying, if you don't do what we want you to do, which is just go around to all these different countries and try to find out information, despite the fact that the guy we sent out with you, which I think was a virologist, shoots himself by accident. Dumbass. The movie is just not that interesting. I don't really care about Brad Pitt's character. He's not nearly as interesting as all the individuals that you got to know when you were reading the book. The book did such a good job of making you so empathetic towards the people that you're hearing their stories about. And I really wish they had gone with that angle with the movie, because that's an angle we haven't seen before in a zombie movie. It's something that's different, and it also looks through the perspective of how did the government solve this problem? How did they get through the war? How did they try to regain some semblance of civilization and a society? How did they keep that going when something so terrible is breaking out across the world? They don't really develop it enough in this film to really give you a clear idea of what happened after they found this sort of a defense mechanism. What happened after that? They just kind of say, then began the war. Okay, you're supposed to take them for their word. And it's like, I just kind of wish that it had gone with the same direction that the book had done, because the book is such an interesting concept and an interesting idea for a film. But instead they just made a very generic zombie movie, and something that's just basically very forgettable. I honestly can't remember much about this movie other than the zombies move incredibly fast and way too much shaky cam. And those are not necessarily good things in a zombie movie. Unfortunately, I don't really want to recommend this movie. I feel like it's sort of a film that maybe you might have to see in order to get your own opinion on it. I know I had to, because I had read the book and I really liked the book, so I really went to see what they did. So, and now you know my opinion on that, and now we're going to jump over to my Star Trek Into Darkness review. So Star Trek Into Darkness, this was a film that I had heard many good things about. I enjoyed the first Star Trek movie, and as a point of reference, I am not a Star Trek fan. I've not watched any of the original series. I only briefly watched some of The Next Generation when I was really young, because my dad was into it, and every so often we would sit and watch it together, but I knew nothing about what was going on. It's really not a franchise I can call myself a fan of. And so that's sort of my disclaimer for this review. It's sort of like, if I say something where it might be obvious to a fan, realize that I'm coming at this from a perspective of, I've only ever watched Wrath of Khan, the first Star Trek movie that J.J. Abrams did, and now this. That is my reference for Star Trek. Just saying. And the point of the J.J. Abrams movies, I feel, is to make Star Trek more accessible to a newer generation. Because let's face it, up until J.J. Abrams made his first movie, so Star Trek was kind of an uncool thing to like. And only because he made this more modern, younger, more in with the time kind of movie, it's why it's made such a resurgence and why it's become so part of pop culture now. And I feel like it's a good thing he did that, because I do think that no matter what the source material, things should be given a chance, and you can't just pass it off as, oh, that's the nerdy thing to like. Because I like plenty of nerdy things. And realistically, a lot of the things that I liked growing up were not socially acceptable. No one liked anime when I was growing up. It was not the thing to brag about when I was growing up, and I also read comics. It's like, no one I knew was reading or watching this kind of stuff. So I was very much kind of outcasted because of that. And it's only been recently, only because of the amount of spotlight that these kinds of things have been getting in terms of big budget films, and they're sort of getting highlighted in pop culture. That's why it's become more socially acceptable, and I'm fine with that. I have no problems with people taking things that used to be really nerdy and making them more accessible for a mainstream audience, because that gets more people into things that I like, and it becomes easier for me to say, I like comic books, and I'll be able to find somebody in a crowd that can say, oh, I like them too, want to talk about it. I have no problem with that, but the thing about Star Trek Into Darkness, the one thing that kind of bothers me about it, because in general, I do think it's a really entertaining film for an action sci-fi movie. It does its job. It has a lot of great moments in it. It's really action-packed. It's got great visuals and lots of lens flares. And that's not the issue. It's good for what it is. But my issue with it is sort of the idea that it is sort of just basically a remake of Wrath of Khan. And considering that the first movie was something that was new It was a new idea. It was something that hadn't been done in a previous Star Trek movie, as far as I know, because I read synopsises of previous films and some of the episodes just to be like, okay, had they really made anything? Was there basically a source material for the first film? And other than the characters themselves and looking up the alien races, the first film was basically an original concept idea for the Star Trek universe. But this film, I felt, was much more just basically a remake of Wrath of Khan. And I really wish it wasn't, because they kind of made this out to be more like an alternate universe kind of Star Trek. Not necessarily something that is so tied closely with the original series. So you could take more liberties and you can come up with new ideas and introduce new concepts into the universe, and it would be completely fine because it wouldn't overly conflict with the fans' previous conceptions with the original series. It was just kind of weirding me out, especially because even before I went into the movie and read all the reviews and stuff like that, I knew Benedict Cumberbatch was going to be Khan. Everyone knew he was going to be Khan. It's the second movie, and it's like, if you're going to have someone like Benedict Cumberbatch playing your villain, yeah, probably going to be Khan. And I think it's actually a testament to Cumberbatch's acting, because actually I think this is the first time I've ever seen him act before. I haven't watched Sherlock, and I haven't watched any other film or TV show that he's been in, because I really don't know what else he's been in other than Sherlock. So this is my first time actually seeing him act, and I did not know his voice was that deep, and I didn't know he could have so much range. The fact is, Khan comes off as almost like an android, which kind of makes sense considering he was genetically engineered. So he plays that aspect of it really well, but at the same time, there is a point in the movie where you can almost look at it and be like, I really kind of feel bad for him, and I almost want to be on his side. I almost want to just take his side in this and just be like, I believe you and I trust you and I will help you. You really get to that point because of how emotive he is, but how subtle it is at the same time. And so he does a really good job with that. He's really good at, despite the fact everyone knows he's going to be Khan in the end, and we all know he's going to be the bastard who backstabs the Enterprise. There's the like 5 minutes that you're kind of rooting for him and like, yes, okay, I'm gonna join your side and we're all gonna root for you. Acting wise, the movie was fine. Chris Pine, as usual, did a great Kirk, and also Zachary Quinto's Spock was dead on. I really like Zachary Quinto as Spock. I think he's fantastic. He's, considering he's a character that isn't supposed to show so much emotion, he has these great lines and these great one-liners, and he pulls them off with fantastic timing. So it's really hilarious, though, that such a character can have such a fantastic personality, I want to say, to him, despite the fact he is kind of so lacking of it. The romance with him and Uhura was, I know it's built on from the last movie, but I kind of feel like it got a little too, well, you almost got killed and you didn't really care about me. It's like all this kind of thing. It was a little kind of shoehorned in there. I kind of wish it wasn't there, because I feel like it almost detracts from the rest of the film and what's going on. And also, there's also a new character. I forget what her name is. She's I think the last name is Marcus, and I think she's the daughter of the head of Starfleet. I know I'm probably like totally getting that wrong, but of course, again, not a Trekkie here. There's a scene where she just randomly gets like almost naked. She's just in her underwear for some unexplicable reason. I don't know why she all of a sudden just shows up in her underwear. It's not like it's for a sex scene. It's not like they have to do something where it's going to be like unbelievably hot and so they like start taking their clothes off or something. Like, even that would have been a really stupid reason, but at least it would have been a reason. Like, I don't know why all of a sudden she just appears in her underwear. I can't recall there being a specific reason for it. If there was, I'm sorry I missed it. But it just seemed like, yeah, that just kind of came out of nowhere. I was just like, they really are just shoehorning in as much sex and kind of lovey-dovey scenes they can in here, I guess. In terms of the rest of it, like, a lot of it was just sort of, it kind of just reminded me of the first one again. And I'm actually kind of happy, though, that they didn't actually off Kirk in the end. I'm kind of glad that in the end, it's like, okay, we're gonna use Khan's blood, and we're gonna revive him, and he's gonna be okay. Because then it's like we would have just had a remake of The Search for Spock, except it would have been The Search for Kirk. Um, you know, it's. I'm kind of glad that they went with that because at least now there's sort of like this chance that there won't be a third Star Trek movie. And I guess for me, not being a Trekkie, I'm okay with there not being a third movie because it's like, two of them, yeah, that's fine. I'm not really dying to see how this story continues. I know for the Trekkies, they probably are dying to see this storyline continue, but for me, it's like, I'm kind of done with it. I'm not saying it was a bad movie, but I'm not saying it was fantastic either. I think it was just sort of a meh. It's like it was a fun summer action movie and a good sci-fi movie, but in terms of like the references to Wrath of Khan and that's actually something that kind of bothers me about the movie is the fact that it does make so many pop culture references that everybody, even if you don't watch Star Trek like me, knows about Star Trek. They have basically an exact duplicate scene of Wrath of Khan where Spock is dying, except it's reversed, where you have Kirk who's the one who's dying and Spock is the one on the other side of the glass, and then they have Spock yell out Khan, and it's really cheesy and it's just kind of shoehorned in there, and I really wish he hadn't done that, but I think they figured the first movie did so well, what can we do to make the second movie better? I know, put all the pop culture references from Wrath of Khan and shove them into the second movie. Because that'll make the fans love it more. And to me, that kind of distracted me, because all I could think was, Wrath of Khan didn't need a remake. It was perfectly fine the way it was. Wrath of Khan is a really good movie. Like, even as somebody who, again, did not watch any Star Trek, was a perfectly fine standalone movie. It was just perfect the way it was. Did not need to be remade, and this movie did not need all those references to Wrath of Khan or even to just the show itself. Like, there are some things that I don't mind. Things like Bones saying, "Damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a whatever." You know, that actually kind of makes sense because it's like, well, that's just a running joke. But in terms of like doing the whole exact same scene as Wrath of Khan, basically, I feel like they just did it because they're like, everyone's gonna recognize this, so everyone's gonna love it. That's probably the biggest thing that bothered me about it, but otherwise, you know, it's fun for what it is. I just don't think it was anything great or spectacular. I know a lot of Trekkies will probably like bash on me for saying that, but as the perspective of somebody who is not coming from watching everything before this is just my perspective of it, and I just kind of come away with it like, it was a fun 2.5 hours of space action. So it's like, that was a fun time, sort of. So generally my opinion on all three movies, Great Gatsby I thought was fine. I thought it was a pretty good movie. Not sure if I would pay to see it in the movie, but I think it's definitely a movie that people should watch if they're interested in seeing what kind of visuals Baz Luhrmann has, as well as seeing some pretty good acting. I think World War Z is not made for the people who read the book. I feel like reading the book has kind of ruined the experience of going to see the movie, which is something I hate. I hate the fact that I'm so angry that the movie is not like the book. But the main reason for that is because the book is so different. And I really wish that they had just gone with that idea more. And with Star Trek Into Darkness, fun action movie, fun summer movie, just kind of wished it didn't mimic so much of Wrath of Khan and could have been more its own original idea and taken less from the really cheesy pop culture references that everyone knows. So again, so sorry it's been so long since I've done a review, but hopefully doing 3 reviews consecutively, you guys will forgive me, and I will hopefully be doing more movie reviews. I've actually just bought a couple of DVDs of these horror films that I want to watch, and I might do reviews on them. One of them is called Shadow People, and the other one I think is called Mimesis. And I'm probably going to do reviews of those if and when I watch these movies. Which I spent money on these DVDs. Of course I'm going to watch them. So hopefully I'll do reviews for those soon. And that's about it for now. I guess I'll see you guys later. Peace.